Riverton, Georgia, past 11 o'clock at night. The streets were nearly empty, save for the odd 18-wheeler and a lone factory worker heading home. The hum of the highway filled the silence, broken only by the rustling of trees along. The shoulder dot in a black government-issued SUV, Lieutenant Colonel Grace Johnson drove steady. Her hands relaxed on the wheel. She'd just wrapped a long evening meeting at Fort Anderson, nearly 2 hours south, for her. Late-night drives were routine, a quiet stretch of road after endless hours of military planning. And logistics, no speeding, no weaving, no recklessness, just a calm, deliberate journey north. But on the opposite side of the dark highway, someone was watching. Deputy Sergeant Mark Turner sat in his cruiser, half-slouched, sipping stale coffee, scrolling idly on his phone. The shift had been dead. No calls, no excitement, nothing but silence. Turner hated silence. Silence meant he wasn't in control. So when that unfamiliar SUV rolled past, something in him sparked. Power, the thing he craved most, suddenly had a target. Never seen that ride before, he muttered, tossing his empty cup onto the passenger seat. His hand flicked the switch, and blue and red lights exploded across the asphalt. Grace's rearview mirror lit up. She blinked once, inhaled, and eased her SUV to the shoulder, signaling properly, calm and precise, just like she'd been trained to do. Nothing to worry about, she told herself. Nothing if things stayed fair. The cruiser door slammed. Heavy boots crunched toward her. Turner emerged tall, broad, his hand resting casually on his holster, flashlight cutting through the dark. He didn't approach the passenger window. He went straight for hers, hard and fast. License and registration, he barked. No greeting, no courtesy. Grace rolled her window halfway, both hands visible on the wheel. Her voice was measured, even. Officer, may I ask why I'm being stopped? Turner squinted, shining the beam straight into her eyes. You were drifting. Lanes didn't signal. Looked like you might have been drinking. Grace raised an eyebrow. I wasn't. License and registration, he repeated, louder, sharper. She didn't argue. Moving slowly, deliberately, she opened the glove box and handed over her documents. As she did, she added quietly, that's a government vehicle. I'm a federal employee. Turner glanced at the ID, then smirked. Military, huh? Doesn't mean you're above the law. I never said I was, Grace replied evenly. His tone hardened. Step out of the vehicle. Grace blinked. Excuse me, I said step out. I'm conducting a sobriety check. Her jaw tightened, but her voice stayed steady. On what grounds? I've complied. I haven't been drinking. I'd like to know the reason. Turner stepped closer, looming. So you're refusing a lawful order? No. Grace said calmly. I'm asking for clarification. He didn't like that. Turner yanked her door open himself. Out of the car. Now, that's when Grace reached for her phone. Without a word, she tapped the record button. Just so we're clear, she said firmly, this interaction is being documented. For the first time, Turner's eyes flicked to the phone. A flicker of hesitation crossed his face, but his pride was louder than caution. Out. He snapped. Grace stepped out. She wasn't defiant, but her posture was straight, unyielding. Even in civilian clothes, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades commanding soldiers. Turner noticed, but his ego wouldn't let him stop. He made her walk the line under the street lamps. Grace did it perfectly. Straight, steady, not a stumble, not a slur. She passed every test. Still, Turner wrote the ticket. Failure to maintain lane. Grace accepted the citation wordlessly. No fight, no argument, just a single, sharp look. Then she got back in her SUV, started the engine, and drove away into the night. But Turner had no idea what that piece of paper meant. No idea that the footage she'd recorded would make its way into the hands of lawyers, inspectors, and eventually a courtroom. No idea that the quiet soldier he'd tried to humiliate would be the one to pull the mask off his untouchable badge. Back at the Riverton precinct, the night wound down like any other. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting pale shadows across chipped desks and coffee-stained paperwork. Sergeant Mark Turner strolled in, tossing his citation folder onto the counter without a second glance. To him, it was just another night, Another driver, another reminder of who held the power. 15 years on the force had carved deep lines into Turner's face, and even deeper grooves into his habits. He'd built a reputation gruff, uncompromising, never one to back down. The rookie straightened up when he entered a room, and Turner loved it. To him, the badge wasn't just authority, it was immunity. No questions asked, no apologies given. He was judge, jury, and when he felt like it, executioner. Of the roadside lecture, filed the citation, Officer Ramirez asked from across the bullpen, glancing up from his report, logged it. Turner replied, stretching his shoulders. Lady tried to flash her government ID at me. Thought she was special. His tone dripped with disdain. He leaned back in his chair, ripping open a bag of chips, some fed with an attitude. Ramirez paused, brow furrowed. Wait, she was military, so she says. Turner smirked, crumbs falling onto his vest. Didn't impress me. On the road, I'm the authority. Across the room, Officer Diaz, a quiet but sharp veteran, looked up slowly. Grace Johnson, he asked carefully. Turner cocked his head. Yeah, why? Diaz's eyes narrowed. You mean Lieutenant Colonel Grace Johnson? Fort Anderson Logistics. To deployments. She gave a lecture at the academy last year. She's not just some soldier. She's high up. For a brief second, Turner froze. The name clicked faintly in his mind, but his pride slammed the door shut. He scoffed, waving it off. Don't care who she is. She's just another driver when I pull her over. My badge, my call. But Diaz didn't laugh. His tone carried weight. The kind of respect that only came from knowing someone's record. It chipped at Turner's armor, just a hairline crack, but one he quickly plastered over with arrogance. He chuckled, shook the chip bag. Rank doesn't matter out there. Not to me. Still, when he tossed his body cam onto the charging dock, he didn't bother reviewing the footage. Didn't think twice. In his head, it was done and buried. Same as every other stop. After all, he'd been shielded before by supervisors who looked the other way, by union reps who shut down complaints. He believed the rules bent around him, and why wouldn't he? For years, they had. Turner leaned back in his chair, retelling the stop to anyone within earshot. The way some men bragged about fishing stories made her walk the line. He chuckled, past it. But I wrote her up anyway. You should've seen the look she gave me, like she thought her stripes meant something. A couple of the younger officers chuckled nervously, more at his confidence than the story. But Diaz didn't. He shook his head slowly, muttering under his breath, you don't know what you've just stepped in. Turner didn't hear or pretended not to. To him, Grace Johnson was just another citation in the system, a number on a form. He had no idea that, at that very moment, a complaint was already on its way, that the video she recorded was sitting safely in the hands of lawyers who weren't laughing, that her chain of command wasn't brushing it aside, and that the untouchable shield of his badge was about to meet something heavier, something he couldn't swagger his way past. Morning sunlight crept through the blinds of Fort Anderson's administrative wing. Inside her office, Lieutenant Colonel Grace Johnson sat at her desk, eyes fixed on the glow of her laptop screen. She hadn't slept much. Not because she was rattled. Grace was a veteran of late nights, war zones, and hurricane relief missions, but because the encounter kept replaying in her mind. The flashlight in her face, the hand hovering over a holster, the tone that carried nothing but contempt. She knew the script all too well. She knew how quickly a situation like that could have turned sideways, and the part that lingered wasn't just what had happened to her. It was how routine it felt to him. How comfortable Sergeant Mark Turner had been while belittling her, treating her like a problem to be managed, instead of a citizen, let alone a federal officer deserving of. RESPECTA knock on the door pulled her out of thought. Sergeant Daniels, her aide, stepped in. You good, ma'am? He asked gently. Grace leaned back, expression steady, but her eyes betrayed the storm beneath. No, she admitted, but I'm handling it. Daniels hesitated, then closed the door. I saw the footage. He said quietly, you want me to loop in the base attorney? Already done, Grace replied without pause. You sure you want to take this further? Public. Once it's out, it follows you. Grace's lips tightened. I'm not looking for headlines. I'm looking for accountability. It wasn't just about herself. Grace had spent 22 years in uniform, carrying soldiers through combat zones, coordinating convoys across hostile terrain, overseeing logistics that meant the difference between life and death. She had mentored young cadets, watched them grow into officers. She had seen women, especially women of color, swallow indignities just to keep the peace, to avoid making it worse. Not this time. This time, she pressed send. Attached was the video. Alongside it, a formal complaint filed with the Office of the Inspector General. With a copy routed to Internal Affairs, the language was clinical, precise, no embellishment, no dramatics, just facts backed by receipts. Grace knew better than to rant. She let the evidence speak. Within hours, the story began to circulate quietly inside military legal circles. Whispers moved through inboxes, forwarded under subject lines that read review, possible civil rights violation. Lawyers nodded grimly at the footage. Some recognized her name, her record, a decorated officer. To deployments, a spotless service file. The kind of credibility that could not be dismissed with a shrug. Meanwhile, at the Riverton precinct, Turner went about his routine like nothing had happened. Writing reports, snapping at rookies, grumbling about his shift. He had no idea that a storm was gathering just outside his sight, that the video he'd dismissed as just another stop was now sitting on desks of people who didn't look the other way, that by treating Grace Johnson like a suspect, he had just handed her the power to put him on trial. For Grace, the decision wasn't about revenge. It was about principle. She looked at the faces of her soldiers, fresh recruits, eager but uncertain, and thought of the message she wanted them to carry. That silence wasn't the only option. That authority, even wrapped in a badge, could be challenged when it crossed the line. And with one complaint, one video, one unshakable voice, Grace Johnson set that message in motion. 3 days later, the morning at Riverton precinct felt like any other. The chatter of radios, the stale smell of burnt coffee, the rhythm of boots echoing on tile floors. For Sergeant Mark Turner, it was just another shift. He walked through the parking lot, badge gleaming, confidence intact. Then he spotted the envelope on the hood of his cruiser, plain manila, his name typed neatly across the front. The return address, Fulton County Civil Court. Turner tore it open casually, expecting some routine memo, maybe another traffic summons. He unfolded the document and froze. Notice to appear. Plaintiff, Lieutenant Colonel Grace Johnson. Charges: violation of constitutional rights, unlawful detainment, intimidation, abuse of authority. For a moment, the world narrowed to the page in his hands. Then Turner barked out a short laugh, shaking his head. No way this sticks. But when he stepped back inside, the mood had shifted. Officers glanced at him from behind computer screens. Whispers passed in the hallways. He felt the change, like blood in the water. His captain, Thomas Reading, was waiting. "Dan, in my office," the captain said curtly. The blinds closed, the door shut. Turner dropped into the chair, arms crossed. "What's this about?" "The woman you stopped." Reading began. His voice was tight. "She filed a complaint. Not just with us, federal too." Turner rolled his eyes. "She's trying to play victim. Got pulled over, didn't like it." Reading leaned forward. "She's not some woman. She's a lieutenant colonel, combat veteran, clean record, and she's got the whole thing on tape, 2 angles, yours and hers." Turner scoffed. "So what? We just roll over because she's got stripes. I didn't touch her, didn't arrest her. I followed procedure. You escalated." Reading shot back. "You treated her like a suspect before you had any grounds. That's not procedure, that's arrogance." For once, Turner didn't have a snappy retort. His jaw tightened, eyes flicking to the folder on the captain's desk. The court date was stamped clearly, 3 weeks from now. Outside, the precinct hummed with rumors. Officers didn't say anything to his face, but Turner could feel at their sidelong glances. The silence when he walked by. For years, he'd been the wolf in the room. Now, he was bleeding, and the pack could smell it. Meanwhile, at Fort Anderson, Grace was preparing too, but in a very different way. No press conferences, no theatrics. She sat with her attorney, reviewing every frame of footage, every line of her testimony. Calm, relentless, most people would have let it go. Her lawyer, Delaney Price, remarked, "I've let too much go already," Grace said quietly. She wasn't after money. She wanted something bigger, a public record. Proof that power without accountability was weakness. Proof that silence wasn't the only choice. And when she stepped into that courtroom, she wouldn't be just a driver who'd been pulled over on a dark road. She would be Lieutenant Colonel Grace Johnson, and she was ready to make that stand. The courthouse in downtown Riverton, Georgia, didn't usually draw much attention. Civil suits came and went, slip and falls, property disputes, traffic violations. But that morning, the hallways buzzed. Military uniforms from Fort Anderson mingled quietly with off-duty officers. Civilians squeezed into benches, and reporters hovered near the entrance, sensing something bigger than a traffic stop. Gone wrong. At the defense table, Sergeant Mark Turner sat stiff in a gray suit, jaw set, eyes forward. The smirk he wore at the precinct was gone, replaced with something harder, tighter. His attorney, Charles Brenner, leaned in close, whispering strategy. But Turner's gaze was locked on the doors. He knew who was about to walk through them. And then she did. Lieutenant Colonel Grace Johnson entered the courtroom in full service. Uniform, medals gleamed on her chest, her rank clear as daylight. Every eye turned. Conversations stilled. She didn't rush, didn't posture. But the weight of her presence filled the room. She wasn't just a woman pulled over in the night. She was a decorated officer who had commanded convoys through war zones, who had carried soldiers and supplies across continents. And now, she was here for accountability. Turner's eyes flicked to her, and for the first time, his expression faltered. Just for a second. The judge cleared his throat. "Colonel Johnson, thank you for your service. Please proceed." Her attorney, Delaney Price, rose. "Lieutenant Colonel, could you describe?" The night of January 17th, Grace spoke plainly, her voice steady and even. "I was driving home from Fort Anderson around 11:15 p.m. I was pulled over by Officer Turner. There was no erratic driving, no impairment. I complied with every instruction. When I asked why I was stopped, he responded with aggression. He demanded I exit the vehicle without explanation. When I asked again for clarification, he escalated. At that point, I began recording on my phone. "Did you ever refuse a lawful order?" Price asked. "No." "Did you resist in any way?" "No." "Did you identify yourself?" "Yes." I informed him I was a federal employee driving a government vehicle. The room was silent except for the scratch of pens on paper. Grace's words hung heavy, calm, and unshaken. Then came the playback. First, her phone footage steady, clear, showing every word, every demand, every controlled response. Then Turner's body cam. The courtroom watched as the screen captured his posture, his tone, his hand hovering near his weapon. Even as she remained cooperative, the unnecessary field test, the dismissive shrug when she passed it flawlessly. The jury didn't speak, but the air shifted. Everyone could feel it. When cross-examination began, Brenner approached carefully, his tone respectful but probing. "Lieutenant Colonel Johnson, with all due respect, do you believe Officer Turner was simply following protocol, ensuring public safety?" Grace's eyes held steady. "Protocol requires judgment, discipline, respect. That badge isn't a free pass, it's a responsibility." The line hit hard. Even the judge paused before continuing. And then, Turner himself was called not to testify, but to watch. The prosecutor replayed the footage again, frame by frame. Every clipped command, every dismissive glare, every unnecessary escalation. For the first time, the courtroom could see what Grace had seen that night. A man who wielded authority like a weapon. Not a duty. 3 weeks earlier, it was just a stop on Reynolds Road. Now, it was the centerpiece of a trial that asked a single question: what does accountability really look like when power is abused? 3 long days passed before the jury returned. By then, the courthouse had grown quieter. No more crowded benches of officers in uniform. No more whispers of speculation in the hallway. Just a handful of civilians, Grace Johnson, her attorney, and Sergeant Mark Turner sitting rigid at the defense table. The air was heavy when the judge entered. Everyone rose, everyone sat, and then silence. The foreperson stood. We, the jury, find that Sergeant Mark Turner violated the plaintiff's civil rights during an unlawful stop and detainment. Furthermore, the jury finds that his actions were inconsistent with department policy and with the professional conduct expected of a law enforcement officer. No gasps, no applause, just the weight of the words sinking into the room. Turner's attorney leaned close, whispering, "We'll appeal." But even he didn't sound convinced. Turner's shoulders slumped slightly, his jaw clenched. For the first time in years, he wasn't untouchable. The judge continued, "While no criminal charges will be filed at this time, the court awards damages of $35,000 to Lieutenant Colonel Grace Johnson. This decision will remain part of the public record." Grace didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She just nodded once, the same way she had when receiving orders in the field. For her, it was never about the money. It was about the record, the proof that someone had finally drawn the line. Reporters in the hallway snapped photos as Turner left the courthouse. He didn't give a statement. He didn't look back. He covered his face with a folder, walked to his car, and drove off without a word. Grace remained inside a moment longer. Her phone buzzed. A message from her attorney. "Verdict in your favor. Case closed." She exhaled softly, as though releasing the last of the night on Reynolds Road. "You could have asked for more," her lawyer, Delaney Price, said. Grace shook her head. "It was never about the money." Price studied her a moment. "Do you think it'll change anything?" Grace turned toward the courthouse doors, her voice quiet but firm. "It has to start somewhere." 2 months later, Grace stood at a podium at Fort Anderson, speaking to a room of young recruits. She didn't mention Turner by name. She didn't need to. "Respect isn't something you're owed," she told them, her voice steady. "It's something you prove every day, in every choice. Authority, whether a badge or a rank, is not a shield, it's a weight, and if you can't carry it with discipline, you don't deserve to carry it at all." In the back row, a young soldier leaned forward, hanging on her every word. Grace closed her folder, glanced across the room, and left them with one final thought: lead with character, serve with integrity, and never forget you don't just represent yourself. You represent everyone who came before you and everyone who will come after. She stepped down from the platform without applause, without ceremony, because for her, the work was already done, and the message was clear. Authority without accountability is nothing but weakness.